You're back.
I finished putting all those envelopes in order.
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Drew. And to show my gratitude, I've got something for you.
Chances are it isn't a paycheck.
No, it's an honorary Junior Park Ranger pin. I keep them on hand so I can give them out to children whom I see demonstrating respect for park rules and regulations. A little bit of positive reinforcement. Unfortunately, I don't get to give them out that often.
Oh, gee, thanks, Ranger Acres. Thanks for all your help.
Always a pleasure.
It looks like a tiny hole. What's the combination? I bet those were deer mice. Speakeasy. Joe Akers? Emily said Jeff Akers' father was named Joe. Maybe Jeff is related to William Akers after all.
The dogs will lead the way. I wonder what that means.
Good news! I have information on your mystery woman.
Thank you so much. Is she still alive?
Her name these days is Vivian Whitmore. She lives in Las Vegas, and her number is 702-555-9137.
Sorry to bother you again, but did those results from the water test come in yet?
There's something here for you from the State Department of Health.
Oh my gosh, not only is the water bad, but it seems like the well may have been contaminated deliberately.
I wouldn't go jumping to conclusions without proof, Ms. Drew. I'm sure there's a far less melodramatic explanation.
What do you know about a man named Joe Akers?
Why do you ask?
I recently found out that William Akers had a son.
All right. William Akers was my grandfather.
Why didn't you tell me that before?
It's not exactly something I'm proud of. My father spent his whole life trying to make people forget what my grandfather was, and trying to make sure people who didn't know what he was never found out. I've been doing the same thing.
What did William Akers do after Malone was arrested?
I'm afraid you're going to have to excuse me, Miss Drew. In case you've forgotten, I'm a very busy man. I apologize for my previous behavior. As a park ranger, I strive to keep my personal feelings in check at all times, and that time I failed. It's my duty as a public servant to try to make it up to you. What would you like to know?
What can you tell me about the gold that Malone supposedly buried on his property?
As far as I know, it doesn't exist. It's just one of those rumors people want to believe, so they do.
Thanks for all your help.
Not a problem.
Nice junior park ranger pen. You must really be on Acres' good side.
I found an old newspaper in Sally's house that contained an article on Mickey Malone. It really got my curiosity going. What else can you tell me about him?
Person you should talk to is Jeff Acres. He's got this historical museum thing going out at that ranger station of his.
Do you know anything about the gold that Mickey Malone supposedly buried somewhere on his property?
All I got to say about it is, if there really was a bunch of gold buried somewhere and nobody ever found it, it's for darn sure nobody ever will. Not with them dogs up there.
Guess I'll see you later.
Always a pleasure.
If you're selling something, hang up right now. I got an air horn in my hand that could deafen a dinosaur, and I'm not afraid to use it.
Oh, no, please. I'm not selling anything. Believe me. Is this Vivian Whitmore?
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You got exactly 5 seconds to state your business.
My name is Nancy Drew. I'm calling from Moon Lake, Pennsylvania. I just wanted to ask you some questions.
Oh, right. The Moon Lake Park Ranger said you might call. But you have to talk fast. An old friend of mine is flying in today from Florida. And when I say old, I mean old, as in 5 years older than I am. Don't bother trying to do the math, sweet stuff. You'll hurt yourself. So, that ranger fella said you found an old picture of me.
It was of you and Mickey Malone. Do you remember him?
Of course I remember him. I remember everything about that time of my life. It was the roaring 20s, for crying out loud. One of the most exciting decades in American history. Just because I've got a few years on most people doesn't mean my brain's turned to tapioca, sweet stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you.
Mickey and I dated for 5 years. Oh, I knew what he was, and I didn't approve, believe you me. But I was young, and we got along so well, and he was so considerate. He always kept birch beer on tap at that speakeasy of his just for me.
Do you know anything about the safe that's in the cellar of his house at Moon Lake?
You must be talking about the wall safe. That was Willie's. He was a guy who worked for Mickey.
Did all Malone's employees have their own safes?
Not hardly. Mickey treated most of his employees like dirt, but not Willie. He honestly liked Willie, trusted him. And when Willie decided he wanted his own safe, Mickey said, "What the hey?" No one knew the combination, not even Mickey. Mostly because Willie was constantly changing it. He was a little paranoid and superstitious. Well, as I recall, he picked the most unlucky number he could think of and used that for the combination. He called it a reverse jinx.
Unlucky number? Like what?
Oh, like the date that something bad happened, like when the stock market crashed, or when somebody died, or the address of a house that caught fire, or the phone number of the police, that sort of thing.
What can you tell me about Malone's Speakeasy?
It was in the basement, right there at Moon Lake. Feds never knew about it, but everybody who was anybody on the East Coast back then, actors, musicians, bankers, politicians, they knew. You weren't big time unless you'd made at least one trip to Moon Lake Mickey's.
That's weird. I'm staying in his old house on Moon Lake, and I haven't seen any sign of a speakeasy.
Course you haven't. You're not supposed to. Only Mickey and Willie knew how to get into the speakeasy from the house. The rest of us had to go in and out the regular way, through the cemetery.
The cemetery?
There was a lock hidden in one of the tombstones in that little cemetery behind the house. You needed a key to unlock it, and when you did, stairs would appear that led to the speakeasy.
Do you have any idea how to get into Malone's Speakeasy from the house?
I sure don't. That saloon was built using two main ingredients, concrete and secrecy. Mickey always bragged that nobody could get in unless he wanted them in, and I do believe he was right. But I'll tell you what, if you send me that picture of me and Mickey, I'll send you my key.
The key to the tombstone? You still have it?
It's in the bottom of my jewelry box. I've come this close to throwing it out 100 times, but it's so small, and the memories it brings back are so big. Well, I just couldn't, as a joke. Mickey had a tombstone made with the name of this federal agent who had it out for him inscribed on it. That's the one the key unlocks.
William Akers, the guy you call Willie. He wrote about looking for the gold that Malone had supposedly buried on his property at Moon Lake. Do you know anything about that?
The hole-in-the-floor gold heist. Well, I'll be darned.
So it's true? He did bury gold on his property?
Truth be told, when Mickey told me he was the one who pulled off that heist and that he'd buried 20 gold bars at Moon Lake, I didn't believe him. I thought he was making it up. See, Mickey and I were on the outs by then. I thought he was just trying to entice me to come back. But if he told Willie the same thing, maybe there's something to the story after all.
Do you have any idea where he might have hidden it?
Afraid not. Mickey was so secretive that the men who completed his house at Moon Lake were not only forbidden to talk about the work they'd done, but they were ordered to leave the state for good, or else. But you know, I think he mentioned a map. Yes. He said he was making a treasure map and that... the dogs. Something about those dogs of his.
The dogs will lead the way?
He was always saying that. In fact, I'm pretty sure he had it engraved on his tombstone. Think, Viv, think. He said he was making a treasure map, and that he was also having paintings done of each dog. He made it sound like one thing had something to do with the other, like he was giving me some big important clue. But I just figured he was playing games, trying to lure me back with mystery and intrigue. I told him to buzz off. Maybe I shouldn't have.
Did he say what he was going to do with the paintings?
He said he was going to hang them in the speakeasy, and I'm sure that's precisely what he did.
Can you remember anything about Malone's dogs that might suggest where he hid the gold?
I stayed away from his dogs. They made me nervous, always jumping around, barking at this or that. The only one I liked was, what was his name? Iggy! I liked Iggy because he was nice and quiet. He just lay on the porch all day and didn't make a peep.
It's been fun talking to you.
Absolutely, positively.